child, lost in the fog, and I'm frightened of meeting all you known unknown.
Hello and welcome to Poly Risk Reward. My name is Ned Stranger, and in 2024, my wife and I received the results of a DNA paternity test that showed that I'm not our daughter's biological father. Through these podcasts, I tell the story of our open marriage and this unexpected twist in forensic detail, with each episode focusing on a common question I get about open marriage, polyamory, and this unusual situation. Back when I was living in England and in a previous relationship, I realised I had feelings of desire towards a friend from school. And she was somebody that I'd hooked up with, like we'd kissed on a previous occasion before that relationship started, but I could feel the desire was still there. And wanting to somehow communicate this to her without just explicitly telling her, I decided to make her a Spotify playlist. So this was in the sort of time-honoured tradition of making a mixtape for a girl you like. And when I was a teenager, before I learned how to flirt, I would make CDs, like compilation CDs for girls. And now nothing had changed really. It just, instead of a CD, it was a Spotify playlist. But there was a part of me that knew that I was doing something wrong with this. And in the film High Fidelity, which was a film I really liked growing up about music and breakups, and it's adapted from the book by Nick Hornby, there's a scene towards the end where the main character makes a mixtape for a journalist that he has a bit of a crush on, and he clearly feels this inner conflict about whether or not this constitutes sort of emotional cheating on his girlfriend. I made this playlist for this old school friend, but it was no ordinary Spotify playlist. I had also included an acrostic. For those of you who don't know, an acrostic is one of those puzzles where the first letters of words or certain letters within words spell out a message. And in my playlist, the first letter of each song name spelled out the phrase, "sleep with me." Now, I realise this is slightly ridiculous when I say it in hindsight. It's like the Sherlock Holmes school of flirting with somebody. And I never actually found out whether the school friend saw this message that I'd hidden in the playlist, because what did happen is that my girlfriend was, for some reason, logged into my Facebook on her phone, and she accidentally saw my messages, and she saw this message with the playlist, and she immediately spotted the cryptic message in the acrostic. So she confronted me with this, and I acknowledged that I'd done something wrong and felt really, really guilty about it at the time. And even looking back, the fact that it was a long time ago, and recognizing how convoluted a way of flirting this is, I still feel like I did something wrong and recognize that it was, I suppose, a form of cheating. But that does raise the more interesting question of what actually constitutes cheating. So where is the line between doing something wrong and just doing something within a relationship? And specifically for my purposes, how has that changed between my previous monogamous relationships and the open marriage I now have with Anya? So has it become clearer or less clear? And so that's what I'm going to be exploring in today's episode. Firstly though, do we really need a definition of cheating? Well, I think it's something that we need to think about because of how emotionally charged and angry the response to cheating is. Not just from the person who's cheated on, but their family and their friends, and even anonymous people on the internet. So to illustrate this, I went on some very recent Reddit threads from the last few days and looked at how people respond to questions about cheating. For example, on whether cheaters can ever change, Throwaway 03461 said, and I quote, "Cheating is bad and the people who do it are bad. That said, I do believe they can change, but it's going to be a long and bumpy road. It's like trying to find a decent job when you have a criminal record. It's not impossible, but it is very difficult." So Throwaway is comparing cheating to having a criminal record there. And another person, Help I'm Stuck 3, wrote, "Of course anyone can change, but if I'm cheated, I'm not so forgiving. A cheater can change, but that doesn't mean they get my forgiveness or acceptance." So advocating not forgiving for cheating. Once you've done it, that's it. Some other people wrote things like, "Probably not, so I'd never wasted time with one," or "once a cheater, always a cheater, or regardless, people who cheat are still bad people. Well, how many of us are bad people? Lots of people have tried to do studies on this, and it's very difficult because of how vague the definition of cheating is, as we will see later in the episode. But at the lowest end of the spectrum of these studies on American couples, 26% of women and 33% of men cheat. And that's based on a relatively strict definition of it. So at least 1 in 4, 1 in 3 of us are apparently bad people. But what is it we're actually being convicted of? Is watching porn cheating? Is masturbating cheating? Is holding hands with a colleague cheating because she needs comforting because she's recently lost her pet dog, for example? Is sending a text to a friend that you find attractive cheating? What about kissing? So to look for inspiration, I turned to Esther Perel's 2017 book, The State of Affairs, in which she explores questions around infidelity and cheating, drawing on her years as a professional psychotherapist. So everyone else is out, getting ready for Christmas, doing some shopping, enjoying the Christmas markets. I'm sitting at home reading a book about cheating. That is my life. And in her book, she proposes a 3-pronged test as a guide for working out whether something counts as cheating or not. And these are kind of to be taken in balance with one another. So a little like my Ned test from a few episodes ago for determining whether a rule is good or not. So her 3 factors are as follows. First, cheating may involve some element of secrecy. So if it's something that you're hiding from your partner, that makes the behavior dishonest enough that it could be cheating. Now that's obviously not enough. I do things all the time that I hide from Anya. For example, sometimes I like to listen to the football without telling her because I know she thinks football is lame and will judge me if I'm listening to it, so I just don't tell her. So the other 2 factors that she talks about in the book are sexual alchemy, so what she uses to kind of put a lens that this behavior is not just any behavior, it's like sexually related, and this doesn't have to involve physically touching somebody. It could be more complex than that, especially in our digital age. The third factor is emotional involvement. Of these 3 factors, I think the most interesting is secrecy because it's quite revealing about what's going on. The truth is, with sexual alchemy and emotional involvement, they're both quite circular and different people will have different definitions within a relationship. But I think secrecy is really important. And this is where we come to the tension between whether you should share everything with your partner and be completely transparent versus how much privacy you're both owed within the relationship. And this is a big tension that different people will have different opinions on. So I place a huge primacy on the individuality and personal space that Anya and I both have within the marriage. And I hope that there are things that she does or thinks without telling me, because it would be overwhelming if she felt like she had to share everything. And in fact, that mystery and uncertainty between us is one of the things that creates so much attraction. You know, we're attracted to each other. We're not fused as one unit. But then there are other people who think that spouses shouldn't keep any secrets at all from each other. So even the idea of secrecy is quite circular and different people will have different opinions. And this is breeding ground for uncertainty. So you have all the ingredients here for a very messy cocktail. You've got vague definitions of cheating, differences of opinion within a relationship about what the right level of privacy is, as well as what constitutes sexual acts or emotional involvement. And on top of that, a very emotionally charged reaction to cheating, including from people who aren't even in the relationship, or maybe have never even met you and they're just anonymously posting on Reddit. All of this has led me to think about cheating and relationships in a slightly different way. I've talked in the past about how I studied law at university, and this has informed how I think about rules. And one of the cornerstone principles of English criminal law is that you can't be convicted of a crime that didn't exist at the time of the act. But the other really crucial principle is that ignorance of the law is no excuse. So we're all taken to know what the rules are. And for that reason, the rules have to be precise. And I bring this logic into relationships, but relationships are not the same thing as criminal law. Instead, they are more nuanced emotional contracts between 2 or more people that evolve as the needs and desires of those people also evolve. If you're cheated on, the issue isn't the act itself. It's the fact that the other person knew in advance that it would hurt you and went ahead and did it anyway. And then very often lied about it. And then they'll try to justify it, not necessarily just in terms of their own needs, but in terms of the relationship. And this is where things get very messy and it starts to feel like victim blaming, when really it's their own needs, the cheater's needs, that are at play. So for example, maybe they had an affair with their singing teacher, not because of any problems with your relationship, but because they had this need for adventure and they felt like they weren't adventuring enough in themselves. You feel betrayed, but they've just been trying to fulfill their own needs and then gone about it in a way that's dishonest because they can't ask for the thing that they want. And many people, most people probably, screw up like this all the time. And this is where we come to what I would say is my hot take from this episode. People often say that communication is the most important thing within a relationship. And actually in her book, Esther Perel urges people to discuss these things in advance rather than reacting to a crisis and an affair when it happens and then talking about, what needs were unfulfilled or what different people understand what cheating means. Instead, you should proactively discuss these in advance so you can understand how your partner thinks about these things. So this might be questions like, how would you feel if you found out that I kissed somebody at a party? Or what does cheating actually mean to you? Like, where do you draw the line? And these kind of like almost hypotheticals to gauge where your partner feels and where their moral boundaries are on certain things. And I totally agree. I think communication is really important. But even more important, in my opinion, is this idea that your partner is an individual, flawed, idiosyncratic person who will change their mind over time, who will have private secrets that they don't want to share with you. And an acceptance that your partner is sometimes going to fuck things up, I think is even more valuable than trying to communicate everything as openly as possible. Because no amount of communication can ever completely remove the risk that one or both of you is going to get hurt in the future. This is the thing. Sometimes things go wrong, and forgiveness is far more useful to you and the relationship than rigidly sticking to an idea that they have done something wrong and need to be punished for it. I used to think that the big thing that changed between monogamous relationships and my open marriage was that we had more clearly defined what was acceptable and unacceptable, and there was a much narrower field of things that I wasn't allowed to do, i.e. unprotected sex with people, going to someone's place without telling Anya. That is true, that has really helped, but I think even more important is that we've really worked on this idea that we don't own one another, we don't own one another's thoughts, we don't get to know all the secrets of the other person, and I have much stronger faith in the fact that when I do something that hurts Anya, and there will always be things I do that hurt Anya, and vice versa, that we can move on from it and grow from it rather than punishing one another from it. And I think that is the big thing that has changed from monogamy to non-monogamy for me, rather than a purely contractual reading of what the rules are and how much freedom there is. And this is a theme that I will return to again and again and again as the story unfolds, because it's the reason I've been able to not only accept, but embrace everything that happened after this point, and make those things not define me negatively, but grow me positively.
And you don't know.
Now, I'm not saying that cheating is fine or that you should just immediately forgive anything that upsets you. There will be things that upset you in a relationship or that you do that hurt your partner. But I do think the balance is too tilted in favor of finding wrongdoing and feeling betrayed, rather than this idea that these moments are opportunities to empathize and listen and grow as a couple. The thing is, you can't avoid getting hurt or hurting your partner. And avoiding it is not only not possible, it's not even desirable, because pain is part of the human experience and it's part of love. And as horrible as it is to admit, the times that I cheated on my girlfriend with this playlist, for example, or the time I kissed somebody at a wedding in Italy, they weren't only horribly stressful, but they were also some of the most intensely human experiences of my life, where I learned about myself and what my primal desires were. Now, if those make me a bad person, then maybe I'm a bad person, and I'm just grateful that Anya is willing to sign a marriage contract with somebody who is patently a bad person. But I know that if she fucks up, I'll be willing to forgive her, and I think you should too. Not specifically her, but whoever you're with. Finally, I wanted to end with a question for you. Do you think that masturbation counts as cheating? I thought masturbation would be a good way to finish. For this, I turn to the cautionary, even tragic tale of another Redditor, Ferocious FunTube, who wrote this in response to a thread asking what counts as cheating. And I quote, "According to my girlfriend, masturbating. A few weeks ago, I was feeling a little frisky after I woke up. Guys, you know how it is. She doesn't like to be woken or to have morning sex. So I retreat to the living room and take care of it. But halfway through, she walks in and freaks out. Later that night, we were talking about how one of her classmates had split up with his girlfriend and had texted her. She seriously said it would be justified if she slept with him, 'cause I'd jerk off." So there you have it. I know what I think about that. What do you think about that? If you have any thoughts, stories, comments about cheating and some of the themes I've raised in this episode, please drop us a comment or send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you again for listening to this episode of Poly Risk Reward.
You're not growing up, you're just growing old, waiting for the fight to unfold. And now underneath the building's bare, there are many teeth and steel and glass and false belief rising up and leaving you behind.